Well, it's a pleasure to be able to share with you today some of the discoveries, some of the productions of Dr. Danny Ben-Gigi, who has brought the Hebrew language into the venue of being able to be understood by virtually anybody. Welcome to Prophecy in the News, Danny.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gary. Thank you.
You know, the thing that you do that I think other people have tried, but they may not have done it as well as you do, is to bring what many say is a very difficult language down to the level of being able to be learned by ordinary people.
Well, first, thank you, but I think I was just lucky to be born in the right place, and it's Israel.
You know, I must say, I studied Hebrew some time ago from a Sabra, someone who grew up in Israel. And she was a wonderful lady, and she taught us a class Hebrew, and she said, now I must warn you, when we start, this Hebrew is a very difficult language. And, you know, and she sort of put us on our guard. It was not going to be easy. Well, maybe that's the wrong way to approach it.
Very wrong, Pastor Gary, very wrong. I find Hebrew very simple, and I start speaking Hebrew as soon as I was born, perhaps a few hours later. But the language itself is very simple. It's not complicated. There are only 5 sounds in Hebrew: a, e, o, and u. That's it. This is the whole thing, the vowel structure. And its vocabulary, compare it to English. It has only barely 40,000 words in Hebrew versus 2 million in English. How long does it take you to learn that? And number 3, it's the language of God and angels. It must be simple to those who put the heart and the interest in the Hebrew.
Yeah, when you listen to the Hebrew language, it has a certain melodic flow to it. It's very beautiful. It lends itself to singing. And by the way, on some of your productions, you have the Hebrew set to music and performed by people who know how to sing it. Yes. And when you sing something, it makes it easier to learn, right?
It's a language of worship. So everything that will sound in Hebrew will have the characteristic of worship. See, there is an ancient tradition that is asking us to pray in Hebrew. But one would ask, but I speak English or I speak Spanish. Why should I speak or pray in Hebrew? I'll read to you something of our ancient sages. Our ancient sages, the scholars of the ancient time, spoke about the importance of praying in Hebrew. They taught that even though permission was granted to pray in other languages, then yet it has been always preferred to pray in something that is called Leshon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue. In numerous writings since the biblical era, the Holy Tongue has been known as a reference to the divine spiritual language Hebrew. And the sages taught that it is better to pray in Hebrew, listen to this, even if the praying person does not understand the words. Now, why would that be? An ancient tradition called in Hebrew Masoret is teaching us that the Hebrew alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, existed prior to the creation of the world, and that God has used the 22 Hebrew letters as raw material for the creation. Now, what is the special thing in Hebrew? Hebrew is not just another language. There are much respect to many languages, to all the languages. There is Turkish, and there is Spanish, and there is Italian, and you name it. But Hebrew is different and unique. The Bible that God gave to his people, and the people, we'll talk about that, is an extended people. It's not just the people of Israel per se. It was given to them, but there's an extension we'll talk about. That Bible was written in Hebrew, not in any other language. In your English, it says, God said, let there be light.
Yes.
That sounds like, okay, there's some mediation between the word, between God's request to have light and the appearance of light. Let there be hints as though some other power needs to make the light. Let there be. So now he needs to wait and he see, okay, it worked. Not in Hebrew. In Hebrew, God says the word, Yehi or. I'll repeat that. Yehi or. Yehi does not translate as let there be. It means be light. It's the imperative. It's a command in the word itself. So he emanates the word Yehi, and there is light. So he creates then with Hebrew tongue, with the words. So he does have a special characteristics that is completely void and doesn't exist in other languages.
And Jewish scholars say that that light is the light of God. In other words, it's not some other light that was illuminated elsewhere. It's the light of God, right?
Yes. Well, they talk about the other light, or Shivat Yamim. There was some light before the light of God.
Right.
And then the creation itself.
But when he says, let there be light, he's talking about his own personal radiance.
Yes, yes.
And you're right. It doesn't come through that clearly in English.
Yes, and he says really be light.
Be light.
But we're used to read the Bible in the English language, and we are forced to say, let there be light, or as the Hebrew clearly says, be light. And the word is the action. No need for mediation between his word and the creation.
Now, I'm holding here, and we're going to talk about 3 different products that Danny has produced. And before we talk about these, I just want to say, as a student of languages all my life, I have seen charts of pronouns, verbs, nouns, verb tenses, and so forth. Very confusing. I want to tell you, Danny has made the confusing amazingly simple. I can't believe you did this the way you did.
Thank you.
I'm holding here Biblical Hebrew Essentials. It's a CD. And also it has some charts with it. Now, tell us what this is and what you intend it to do.
Okay, what we did here, we understand that many people, and more so now than ever before, beginning to understand that they want to attain to reach a certain level of knowledge of Hebrew. Not the scholarly level, not the ability to speak like you speak in English or in other languages, but some kind of a knowledge that a person wants to be equipped. Mm-hmm. I see that happening in so many ministries, in churches all around the world, not only in America. Things are happening in China, in Singapore, and in America vastly. Many ministries now understand the power of that. Maybe it's a preparation for the days to come when the salvation, the days of salvation is going to happen. Perhaps it's the Mot HaMashiach, what we say, the days of Messiah are coming. That preparation is propelling people, is pushing them towards the Hebrew. Well, if somebody goes and people are busy, we can't assume that people have all the time in the world just to concentrate on Hebrew. They have to keep their work, they have to keep family, and they have social life, and so on. The idea was, we heard many people say, oh, I wish I knew Hebrew, but it's so complicated, just like you said. Yeah. It's so complex. We decided to focus on something that will make it simpler to the ordinary person, not the scholar, the ordinary person, to attain the Hebrew. So instead of taking a book of like 400 or 500 pages with all kind of cumbersome, complicated terminology, and believe me, I look at some of those books that are supposed to teach Hebrew, I don't understand them, and I'm a professor of Hebrew, because they're using cumbersome language with all kind of terminologies.
Oh, listen, I'm glad you said that, because I've had the same experience. I've some of these Hebrew books that weigh 5 pounds, and you don't know where to start.
Well, we decided to simplify. Simplifying in what you just showed, or we have the other one, it's actually a set of 3. That is the Hebrew language essentials, the basic. Mm-hmm. And it shows basically the Hebrew letters and their sound. And there are only 22. People can learn them in less than a week. I've seen people learning them in about 3 to 4 hours. So that's attainable. Then we did another one that we just showed. And this is focusing, it's called the Biblical Hebrew Essentials. That will focus on the specifics of biblical Hebrew. Now, instead of 500 pages that weigh 25 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever it said, we made it in 10 charts that are clear as day. They're very simple. People can see the rule. Here is some bewildering statement. Many times the word "and" in Hebrew, A-N-D, is just simply the letter, the sound "ve" in Hebrew, "ve" or "va." But in Hebrew, the and or in or so on, the prepositions are not separated words. They are prefixes, meaning that they are attached to the next name. So if I were to say Danny and use your first name without pastor, say Danny and Gary, 3 words in English, Danny and Gary, I would say Danny, the Gary, become the name, and Gary becomes 1 word. So what we did, there was something very strange in the Bible. When you put the word and, it flips it from the past to the future and from the future to the past. Only typical in biblical Hebrew. Now you can write a whole book about that vav. It's called the vav, that letter, the end. But we made it in a simple way to show how does it flip the verse. It's written supposedly in the future, but it means past, and vice versa. Only in biblical Hebrew. Ask me why, and I'll tell you. I don't know.
It's
written
sort of
that
like
way.
making something universal, giving it a timeless feeling or eternal feeling, perhaps.
Yes. Uniqueness.
Yeah.
Special characteristic that only really Hebrew can carry. No other language.
Now, let me just read a verse that we read before we came on today in Zephaniah, and it happens to be chapter 3, verse 9. For then, now the word then here refers to the era of the kingdom, when Jesus returns. He's going to set up the kingdom in Israel, by the way, nowhere else. He's going to set it up in Israel. He's going to build this gigantic, beautiful temple, the most beautiful construction that's ever been on planet Earth. And he says, for then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. Now we read this in English, and it says, yes, I'll turn to the people a pure language. Now, tell us about that pure language.
You want to, first of all, let's be precise here. Let's be precise. That's what your English says. The Hebrew uses the word ehefoch. That doesn't mean I'll turn to them, means I'll flip to them a pure language. Now, what is flipping? How is exactly the Latin languages, the Roman languages, English, Spanish written? From left to right. How is Hebrew written? From right to left. Most of the world is reading it now from left to right. When he says there, I'll flip to them a language, and a pure language. Do you know any other language that is pure? Even the Greek is not pure. The Greek was, with all due respect, was not a pure language. It's a language that was established and written by pagans, and then it was imposed on the people of Israel there because they conquered the land.
Well, it was sort of the English of the first century. You know, everybody spoke it. Even the Romans spoke Greek, and the Jews on the street, they would go to the market, they would speak a little Greek. And it became almost like English. It was comprised of a number of different phrases jammed into one language.
Right. So when he says there, I'll flip to them a pure language, but who is the them? Is that only the people of Israel that are already reading from right to left? No. In Hebrew it says amim. If you check it out, the word amim means nations. So this is in a way a universal
In
prophecy.
other words, not to the Jewish people.
No, this is a universal prophecy that puts together the nations under that pure language. Now, if you can name, you or any of the listeners can name another language that you could call pure, bless your innocence. I don't know of anything else more pure than the Hebrew tongue, the tongue of God and angels, the God that he wrote his book in, and the language, the tongue that he creates in.
Well, let's go back a bit now and talk about some of the other things you've done. I'm going to look at this. This is called, it has a CD with it, and it's called Hebrew Essentials. And it also has a couple or 3 charts with it. Tell us about what Hebrew Essentials is all about.
The idea is simplification. It has all the elements on those 4, actually 6 charts now. We added another chart. There are charts, and they're laminated. They're nice and easy to hold.
Yeah, they're beautiful charts.
Thank you.
I mean, not only are they very sturdy, they're waterproof, they're very nice.
What we did there, we simplified everything, and we noticed that many tutorials or teaching materials assume that people are quick. They can learn in the speed of light. It's not the case. some people are past the age of 30, as we well know, you
Yes.
know, like me. And we need some more time to learn. And we need simplicity. We need larger characters. You know how many times you pick up some kind of medication or something, or a note in a store, and it's so embarrassing that even the glasses are not enough. You will read that, and we wish there was a magnifying glass to read. Well, we understand that, especially when you learn another language. The letters are bold, and we put the emphasis of reading in 3 reading speeds. Everything on that chart is read in very slow pace, second track in slow pace, and the third one in normal reading speed, which is still taking into consideration that these are students. So that helps a lot to hear everything in 3 reading speeds.
And so you have practical grammar charts here. You have these phrases being read very, very slowly so that you can understand what's going on.
You can even, and the word grammar is a scary word for some people. We call it simply components of the language. When you look at them in a friendly way, here is, okay, here is how I do that, and here is how I do that. It doesn't go that deep. It does not attempt to turn anybody to scholar. The idea is having people able to read one word in the Bible. Many people have a verse that is so close to their hearts. I'm sure that you felt it, and I felt it, and everybody there felt it too. The idea is when you feel something like that, when you notice there is something close to your heart, open, find the Hebrew Bible, say the word, and confess it with your mouth. You're doing exactly what happened in creation, and it's different than saying it in Hebrew, just as we read here. Yes, you can say, look, Pastor Gary, there is no doubt that people can pray and speak to the Lord in any tongue. I'm not canceling it. I will never say anything against it. Take even a person that is mute, and the only way that person can speak is like this, or knocking on table. Without a doubt, God will hearken to the heart of that person. But Hebrew allows an extra step. It allows to communicate in the intimate tongue, and nobody can refute that. So if there is a word close to the heart of a person, they can know, here it is the word. I want to pray it. It's in the Hebrew, it's in the English. Say it in the Hebrew tongue. These charts or this package of the Hebrew essentials will allow anyone to reach that goal with ease. That's the point, ease.
Now, there's one thing that Danny does that I really like, and I have to repeat, I've looked at dozens of Hebrew language systems. Some of them, by the way, cost hundreds of dollars. It's whole big sets of DVDs accompanied by big, thick books, you know, and that cost you a lot of money. And they say, yeah, all you have to do is play these soundtracks and just repeat, and you'll learn conversational Hebrew. And yes, you will, but not the way Danny Ben Gigi does it, because you have brought it down to a level that's beautiful. For example, tell us about the accents, because I've never seen anybody else do this. In language, everything has to, when you speak, you have to put the accent on the proper syllable in order to make it sound correct. And most language systems don't do this, but you do it.
Okay, mostly the accent in Hebrew is on the second part of the word, or the syllable the one before the last. To make it simple, it's at the end of a word, not in the beginning. And we put the accent. We did it more so in the phonetic Bible. That's another project we did. But when we enunciate, you can hear clearly where the accent is, and there is no sound that Americans or English speakers cannot really say, except for one, which is the doesn't exist in English. It's the guttural one, ha. Some people go very zealous and say ha. It sounds like almost the person is spitting, but we don't need to go that zealous. We can say ha, very simple and very soft. That sound does not exist in English, so we normally call it the letter is chet, and it's spelled with C-H-A. That's it. That's all what they need to learn. When they see C-H-A, that's the sound of ha. How difficult that was. The rest of them are identical to the English. To make it even more interesting, remember, 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. 22. out of which 11 letters are identical to the English and in the same order. Aleph is A. You can hear Aleph. It's spelled the same, the letter A. Bet is the B. Skip one, and then Dalet. You know it's starting with D. Dalet is the D. And then others, and it's 11 out of 22 people already know. So you just need to know, okay, in English it's D. In Hebrew it's called Dalet. Ah, that's where the delta came from. Right, exactly. And so on. Makes it very simple. But I want to show you something pretty amazing and show you how Hebrew even is hinted to connected to the New Testament. And I know, Pastor Gary, that you have done very extensive work, you yourself and with J.R. Church. You worked and you did writing on the subject, and you went to the mysteries of the Hebrew letters, you yourself.
Yes.
And you, just before we talked here, you told me how many things in the Bible parallel to the 22, to the number 22. And I was in awe. And I was thinking, oh, so you're teaching it. And I thought, okay, I'm introducing something new. No, of course, it's there. And you taught it for years. And you have a book about it, right? And you have a DVD that you published on the 22, on those 22 letters.
Many years ago, as a matter of fact. And but Danny, the thing that gets me is, and again, I have to keep coming back. Danny Ben Gigi has, and just take my word for it, you'll see for yourself. He has, and I don't want to use the word simplified because that's an overused word. You have not simplified, but you have simply made things intuitive. Like you look at it, you can see it, and you can speak it. And it's that simple.
That's the intention, because I already never forgot the seat of the student. You see, when we become teachers, sometimes some of us forget how it was to feel like a student. I always remind myself the student chair. I try to study something new, and I look at the manuals that they have, and I know right away that they talk over my head, because I remember the student chair. But about the 22, this is really startling. You know, the harp of King David, the one that they replicated in Jerusalem. They recreated the harp of King David, and what did they went by the biblical instructions. And they created the harp of 22 strings.
Yes.
No Western musician can play on a 22. How did they play? But they played in Jerusalem at the temple on a 22-string harp. 22 letters of the alphabet. And what do I discover really recently? I'm looking at the occurrences of the word the kingdom of heaven in the New Testament, right? What do you think? Well, you already know. The word kingdom of heaven, if you do a search of a complete word, appears exactly 22 times in the New Testament. You'd put all those things together. If you really believe that is a coincidence, bless your innocence.
Now we have about 3 minutes left. Where has the time gone? And I want to speak with you about this particular edition. This is called the Hebrew Prayer Essentials, and it comes with its own package here. Are these DVDs or CDs?
They're CDs. They're audio CDs, and they play on any, even in the car if somebody wants to hear
let's talk about prayer in Hebrew and how it's different. Now you can pray in any language, as he said, but why should I want to learn to pray maybe in the Hebrew tongue?
That's a very good and valid question. Why should you really pray it in that way? If you look at the New Testament, the students of Yeshua, Jesus, came to him and said, what's the most important prayer that we have? And what does he say there? He quotes Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema Israel, Hear, O Israel. And what we did not try to convert anybody to anything. Nobody needs to become a Jew or anything of that nature. No practices. But praying is communicating with the Creator. That's basically the word of prayer. By the way, Gary, Pastor Gary, sorry.
That's okay. I'm Gary. That's good.
Well, I do need to respect authority of pastors, and I should have said Pastor Gary. But we don't pray. You say a word in English. You could say, I said a prayer. You can pray. A prayer. You cannot say that sentiment in Hebrew. No such thing, I said the prayer. You don't say a prayer in Hebrew. In Hebrew is, I lift up a prayer. That's the expression in Hebrew. It shows the direction where the prayer goes. Say, I can say something to another human being. I can say, but to do a prayer, I need to lift up a prayer. What we did there in the essentials, in the prayer essentials, we only put things that are close to the heart of every believer. The Hero Israel, the Shema prayer. We put the one of the Psalm 23, which is so important. We put the word for Jeremiah 17:14. Show me one human being that does not need to say that. This is the prayer for healing for Jeremiah and the proper way to say that. And we also put there a very important one, ushering the angels of peace, accepting them. This is associated in Hebrew with the Shabbat, and we have a beautiful rendition of that song sang in Israel by the most fabulous singer.
Wow.
It sounds like angel singing.
I wish we had more time. I have just a very short time to offer you this package of 3 very valuable items. We're calling it the Hebrew Essentials Package. Now, each one of these packages, which is a group of studies unto itself, is valued at $29.95. That would be about a $90 value. You can get all 3 of them together in the Hebrew Essentials Package for $69.95. And as a special offer at this time, we have the 2-year Blood Moons Eclipse calendar, and we'll just add that to this package and cost you nothing extra. Ask for the Hebrew Essentials Package when you call the 800 number on your screen. They'll know what you're asking for, and then you can begin the experience of learning Hebrew. Danny, I wish we had more time.
Thank you so much for hosting me here, Pastor Gary.
Shalom.
And shalom to you too. And to the
And
listeners.
to all of you, keep looking up, everybody. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported program made possible by our many friends around the world. Be sure you tune in every day for breaking news and our daily prophetic news updates at prophecyinthenews.com, or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/prophecyinthenews.